The stadium stopped breathing. Not metaphorically. Not the kind of dramatic language that gets used to describe a close play at the plate or a walk-off home run in the ninth. Literally. The kind of collective stillness that descends over 40,000 people when something happens in front of them that their brains cannot immediately categorize. Because what they just watched wasn't baseball. It wasn't a collision at home plate. It wasn't a brushback pitch that got out of hand. It wasn't the slow-building tension of a benches-clearing moment that everyone sees coming 3 innings before it arrives. This was immediate. This was personal. This was Aaron Judge, 6'7", 280 pounds of the most physically imposing presence in the American League, moving toward Shohei Ohtani with something in his eyes that had nothing to do with the game being played. And then the stadium erupted. There are games you remember for what happened between the lines. This will not be one of them. This will be remembered for the 43 seconds after the play was dead. For the moment that started with one man moving and ended with both dugouts emptying onto a field that suddenly felt too small for everything happening on it. This will be remembered for Judge and Ohtani. And what happened between them? The game itself had been building towards something all night. Not a brawl. You cannot predict a brawl. But tension, the specific, pressurized tension of 2 teams that genuinely dislike each other competing in a game that genuinely matters, that had been present from the first inning. The Yankees came in tight. The kind of tight that comes from a team that has been watching another team's name appear above theirs in the standings for long enough that it stops feeling like a statistical reality and starts feeling like a personal insult. And the Dodgers, specifically one Dodger, had done nothing to reduce that tension. Ohtani had been Ohtani. Which is to say he had been impossible. By the 6th inning he had already done things that required the kind of language sports announcers reach for when normal language stops being adequate. The home run in the 3rd. The play in the 5th that had the Dodgers dugout on its feet before the ball had even landed. The at-bat in the 6th that lasted 11 pitches and ended in a walk that felt somehow more deflating for the Yankees pitcher than a strikeout would have been. 11 pitches. Fouled off. Stayed alive. Worked the count. Took the walk. That is not talent alone. That is will. And Judge had been watching all of it from the Yankees dugout with the expression of a man who is being tested in a way he did not fully anticipate. The collision happened at second base. That is the factual beginning of this. A play at second base, the kind that happens dozens of times in a baseball season without consequence, without memory, without anyone writing about it the following morning. Ohtani sliding. The tag applied. Bodies in the same space for a fraction of a second. The play was ruled safe. And that was when Judge moved. He came off the top step of the dugout with a velocity that did not match the casual pace of a player walking onto the field to argue a call. This was not an argument. This was not a veteran player making his displeasure known to an umpire in the theatrical way that baseball has always allowed. This was directed at Ohtani. Judge crossed the distance between the dugout and second base in the kind of focused straight line that leaves no room for alternate interpretation. The people in the seats closest to the field saw it before the cameras fully caught it. They rose before the sound caught up to what they were seeing. And then Judge was there. At second base. In front of Ohtani. What was said in those first seconds has not been confirmed publicly. The lip readers and the audio engineers and the reporters who have spent the days since working their sources have assembled pieces of it. But the full exchange, the words that started this, remains in the space between confirmed and rumored where the most combustible stories always live. What is confirmed is what came after the words. Judge's hand. Ohtani's jersey. Contact that was not incidental and was not accidental and was not the kind of thing that gets overlooked by anyone standing within 50 feet of it. The stadium made a sound that had no clean description. 40,000 people reacting to the same thing at the same moment produces something that is less a noise and more a physical force. You feel it in your chest before you process it with your ears. And then both dugouts were moving. What a benches clearing moment looks like on television and what it looks like from inside it are two entirely different experiences. On television it appears chaotic, undifferentiated. A mass of uniforms converging on a single point with no apparent structure. From inside it there is actually a terrible kind of order. Players finding players. Teammates locating each other in the crowd. Coaches pulling arms. Voices trying to rise above other voices. The pushing and the holding and the specific physical negotiation of men trying to both participate in and contain the same moment simultaneously. The Dodgers came out fast. Freeman was the first recognizable face moving at full speed toward second base. Not jogging. Not the cautious approach of a veteran trying to look present without escalating. Running. With the specific urgency of a teammate who has processed the situation and made a decision about it. Behind him the rest of the Dodgers emptied onto the field in a wave that had its own momentum. The Yankees were already there. Judge, to his credit or his detriment depending on your perspective, did not retreat when his teammates arrived. He stood his ground in the way that very large men who have never had reason to back down from physical confrontation stand their ground, not aggressively, but completely. Like a wall that has no particular interest in moving. Ohtani also did not retreat. That is the detail that the people who were closest to this moment keep returning to. Because Ohtani could have stepped back. Would have been entirely reasonable to step back. The size differential alone would have made stepping back a defensible decision for any professional athlete. He didn't step back. He stood there and he looked at Judge with the same expression he brings to an 11-pitch at-bat. Present. Focused. Unbothered by the scale of what he is facing. And something in that, in the simple refusal to be made smaller by the moment, seemed to affect Judge in a way that the words and the contact had not. The two men stood there for a long second looking at each other. And the stadium held its breath in the way stadiums do when history is deciding which direction to fall. It was Freddie Freeman who got between them. Not an umpire. Not a coach. Freeman, moving through the crowd of bodies with the kind of calm authority that cannot be faked and cannot be assigned, placed himself in the space between Judge and Ohtani with both hands out and his voice steady. He didn't push anyone. He didn't grab anyone. He simply occupied the space. Made himself the thing that had to be moved before anything else could happen. And because of who Freeman is, because of the 20 years of professional credibility he carries onto every field he walks onto, nobody moved him. The crowd around second base began to lose its urgency. Slowly. Then more quickly. The way a fire loses oxygen when the right door is closed. Coaches reached players. Players stepped back. The pushing became standing, became the shuffling separation that always marks the end of these moments, both sides pulling apart, not quite finished but no longer progressing. The umpires converged. Ejections were coming. Everyone on that field knew it. Judge was ejected. The announcement came through the stadium PA with the flat, procedural tone that makes even extraordinary moments sound like routine. Two other Yankees players received ejections alongside him. On the Dodgers side, one player was also removed. Judge walked off the field without argument. That was surprising to some people watching. The man who had crossed a baseball diamond to confront the best player in the sport walked off the field when the umpires told him to leave without the dramatic resistance that the moment seemed to be building toward. He walked past the dugout steps. He walked into the tunnel. He disappeared. And the stadium, which had been holding something enormous for the better part of 10 minutes, finally released it. The sound that came out of 40,000 people in that moment was not clean. It was not a cheer or a boo or any single identifiable emotion. It was everything at once. Relief and residual anger and disbelief and the specific electricity of having witnessed something that people would be describing to each other for years. Ohtani returned to the Dodgers dugout. He sat down. Someone handed him water. A teammate said something to him and he nodded. His expression had returned to the one that people who watch him closely recognize as his resting state, not blank, not performed, but internal. Processing somewhere that cameras cannot reach. He did not look back toward the field. He did not look toward the tunnel where Judge had disappeared. He drank his water and watched the game resume from the dugout steps with the stillness of a man who has decided that what just happened belongs to the past now and the present requires his attention. That is Ohtani. That has always been Ohtani. After the game, Robert stood at the microphone in the press conference room and looked at the reporters assembled in front of him with the expression of a man who has managed a great deal in his career and has added one more thing to the list. A reporter asked him what he said to Ohtani after the incident. Roberts was quiet for a moment. I asked him if he was okay. And what did he say? Roberts allowed the smallest version of a smile. He said he wanted to talk about the at-bat in the 8th inning. Whether we made the right call on the pitch count. The room laughed. Roberts shook his head slowly. Not at the question. At the answer. At the specific, impossible, completely predictable nature of the man he manages. That's Shohei, he said. He said it the way you say something that has stopped surprising you but has never stopped impressing you. That's just Shohei.